Mr. Winkle has made some stew that he wants to share with his friends.
Big Brown Pot, written by Margaret Mayhew and illustrated by Deborah Rigby. One sunny day, Mr. Winkle woke up early. He put on his chef's hat and apron and began to make a stew in his big brown pot. Mr. Winkle added a pinch of this and a pinch of that to the pot. He chopped and stirred. The stew bubbled and boiled. Soon it smelled delicious. What does he put into the stew? Carrots. What can we see? Onion. Not sure what that is. This stew would be better if I shared it, Mr. Winkle said to himself. I will go to visit my friend Tom and take the stew with me. Ooh, the cat's licking his lips. Mr. Winkle went out to his tiny red car. He put the big brown pot on the roof of the car while he opened the door. Then he got in the car and drove away. Uh-oh, what has he forgotten? The pot is still on the roof. As Mr. Winkle drove down the lane, two dogs caught a whiff of the stew. What's a whiff? A smell. They sniffed and sniffed. It smelled wonderful. The two dogs chased the tiny red car. The dog catcher saw the two dogs chasing Mr. Winkle's car. I'd better catch those dogs, she announced, and she immediately drove off in her dog catcher's van. Just then, Mrs. Bright peeked out of the window and saw the dog catcher following the two dogs. Those are my dogs, she cried. I must tell the dog catcher. Mrs. Bright grabbed her helmet and climbed on her scooter. Off she sped, following the dog catcher, who was following the dogs, who were following the wonderful smelling stew in the big brown pot on the roof of the tiny red car. Just then the police were driving by in their police car. What's going on? They said. We'd better find out. So the police followed Mrs. Bright, who was following the dog catcher, who was following the dogs, who were following the wonderful smelling stew in the big brown pot on the roof of the tiny red car. As Mr. Winkle neared his friend's house, he suddenly remembered. Oh no, today is Friday. Tom is at work. I'd better go home. How sad it is that there is no one to share my wonderful stew. Mr. Winkle drove all the way home and stopped outside his own house. The two dogs, the dog catcher, Mrs. Bright, and the police stopped near the tiny red car. Mr. Winkle was searching for the stew. He looked on the front seat and the back seat, but it wasn't there. My delicious stew has disappeared, cried Mr. Winkle. Everyone pointed and shouted, Look on the roof of your car, Mr. Winkle. There it is, said Mr. Winkle. Is anybody hungry? I am, shouted the dog catcher. I am, cried Mrs. Bright. We are, agreed the police officers. Woof, woof, barked the two dogs. Then come inside and share my delicious stew, said Mr. Winkle. There is plenty for everyone.